Your body has been keeping a map of every wound you were never allowed to feel. Not a metaphorical map. Not a psychological construct filed somewhere in the limbic system like a forgotten folder. A physical, structural, measurable archive written into the density of your fascia, the chronic contraction of your deepest muscles, the imperceptible but relentless bracing that your nervous system learned to call normal. You adapted. That was the genius of survival, and that same genius became the architecture of your suffering. Most people are looking in the wrong direction entirely. They go to therapy and talk about the past, hoping that naming it will dissolve it. And then they wonder why the body still braces at night, why the jaw still clenches in sleep, why the chest still collapses inward when someone raises their voice, why the hips still freeze at intimacy, why no amount of insight seems to reach whatever lives below the neck. They stretch the symptoms, they medicate the signals, they narrate the wound without ever entering it. And all the while, the body continues its vigil. All the while, the tissue keeps the score. Peter Levine spent decades watching what happened when mammals survived predation, and his findings were as elegant as they were revolutionary. The gazelle, shaking violently after escaping the lion, was not having a breakdown. It was completing a biological cycle, discharging the enormous charge of survival energy that had flooded its system. It was untying itself, human beings, shaped by culture into stillness, by trauma into performance, by shame into the suppression of all outward trembling. Learn to stop that discharge mid-current. They locked it inside. The freeze became furniture. The fight became fascia. The flight became the tightness you feel every single morning when you first put your feet on the floor and wonder why you are already tired. Bessel van der Kolk, whose clinical research reshaped how psychiatry understands trauma, put it in terms the body cannot argue with. The nervous system of a traumatized person is not remembering the past. It is living in it, perpetually scanning, perpetually bracing. The body does not know that the threat is over because no one ever told it in the language it actually speaks, which is not words. It is sensation, movement, tremor, breath, and release. There are 12 places in the body where this unspoken language crystallizes into knots. 12 thresholds that were sealed rather than walked through. They run from the base of your pelvis to the hinge of your jaw like a spine of silence, each one holding a different frequency of unresolved experience, each one a portal with a specific anatomy, a specific ancient name, and a specific way to begin dissolving what has been frozen there. The ancient traditions mapped these locations thousands of years before neuroscience had a vocabulary for them. What this video offers you is not information about your body. It is a way back into it. It is a complete map, walked slowly, with precision and with care. By the end, you will not merely understand why you brace. You will have begun, in your actual tissue, to let go. The mechanism is not mysterious once you see it, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. When a survival response is activated, the body does something extraordinary. The hypothalamus fires. The adrenal glands flood the bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. The psoas, which is the deepest muscle in the human body, running from the 12th thoracic vertebrae, down through the lumbar spine and across the pelvis to attach at the lesser trochanter of the femur, contracts reflexively. It does this because it is the primary hip flexor, and in a moment of threat, drawing the knees toward the chest and the chest toward the knees is the most ancient protective posture the body knows. The fetus holds it, the sleeping animal holds it, the traumatized human holds it. The traumatized human holds it indefinitely. Liz Koch, who has spent her career studying the psoas and wrote the landmark work, The Psoas Book, describes this muscle not merely as a physical structure, but as a messenger between the upper and lower body, between the voluntary and the involuntary, between the voluntary and the ancient reptilian survival system beneath it. When the psoas is chronically contracted, it does not simply create lower back pain, though it does that. It creates a persistent signal of danger that the nervous system receives continuously, keeping the stress response semi-activated regardless of actual circumstance. The body, in other words, is not reacting to the world. It is reacting to itself, to the memory hardened into its own structure. Fascia is the medium in which this memory lives, the connective tissue that wraps every muscle, every organ, every nerve pathway in the body, is not passive packing material. Research by Robert Schleip, director of the Fascia Research Project at Ulm University in Germany, demonstrated that fascia contains smooth muscle cells that can actively contract, that it is riddled with mechanoreceptors and proprioceptors, and that its fluid crystalline structure can shift from a gel state to something far more rigid under conditions of chronic stress. Traumatized tissue is literally thicker. It has less hydration, less glide, less capacity for the subtle movement through which the nervous system regulates itself. When you feel stuck, when you feel armored, when you feel as though your body belongs to someone else, you are not imagining it. You are sensing a physical reality that happened to you over time, and that, critically, can be reversed over time. The sacrum is where the map begins. The word itself means sacred in Latin, from the Greek hieron, osteon, the holy bone. It was called this because ancient cultures believed it was the last bone to decay, the bone that housed the seed of resurrection. The body knew something. The sacrum is the keystone of the pelvis, fused from 5 vertebrae, anchoring the spine above it and the legs beneath it. And it is the location where the dural tube, the membranous sheath surrounding the spinal cord, terminates its lower attachment. When the sacrum locks, everything above it compensates. The lumbar braces. The diaphragm restricts. The breath becomes shallow and high, which signals the nervous system to remain alert, which keeps the psoas contracted, which keeps the sacrum locked. The cycle is elegant and merciless. What Peter Levine rediscovered and what he named with the precision of a scientist was already inscribed in the oldest wisdom traditions of the world, mapped by hands that had never seen an MRI but had spent lifetimes watching the body speak. In the yogic tradition of India, the oldest textual references to which appear in the Rigveda, dating beyond 3,000 years, the base of the pelvis was understood as the seat of the Muladhara chakra, the root center, the place where the primordial life force called Kundalini lay coiled and dormant. The Sanskrit root mula means root or foundation. Adhara means support or base. The ancient practitioners of Hatha Yoga recognized that chronic fear, specifically the fear of physical annihilation, the most primitive layer of human threat, was stored in this region, and that specific postures, particularly those that combined hip opening with grounded breath and prolonged stillness, could begin to awaken and liberate what was held there. They were not speaking poetically. They were describing a technology they had refined across generations of careful observation. In the Taoist tradition of China, the sacral region was associated with the lower Dan Tian, the field of elixir positioned 2 inches below the navel and several inches inward, considered the foundational reservoir of Jing, the densest and most primordial form of vital energy. The practice of Qi Gong, with its gentle, oscillatory movements rooted in the lower body, was understood as a way of liquefying what had hardened there, of restoring the natural circulation of energy through a vessel that had been dammed by shock, by grief, by the relentless compression of unexpressed experience. The Dagara people of West Africa, as described by the scholar and spiritual teacher Malidoma Patrice, some in his writings on indigenous ritual, located grief specifically in the body's lower geography and understood its unprocessed accumulation as a disruption of the community's connection to ancestral wisdom and elemental forces. Grief, in this tradition, was not a private psychological event. It was a physiological and communal one, requiring specific ritual movement, sound, and witnessed release to complete its passage through the body. And the Hermetic tradition, encoded in the Emerald Tablet and later elaborated through the European alchemical lineage, offered the principle of solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate, as the primary law of transformation. What has crystallized must first be dissolved before it can reconstitute in a more coherent form. This is not a metaphor when applied to traumatized tissue. Chronic fascial contraction, the hardened armor of a nervous system that learned to protect, must be gently, intelligently dissolved before new patterns of tone, mobility, and regulation can form. The alchemists were describing somatic liberation centuries before the word somatic existed. Levine did not invent this knowledge. He did something perhaps more important. He translated it back into a language that a skeptical modern world could receive, equipped it with clinical evidence, and demonstrated in practice after practice that the body's own intelligence, given the right conditions and the right guidance, already knows the way through. There is a particular enemy that lives behind all 12 of these knots, and most people never name it directly. It is not trauma as an event, it is the absence of a language in which to complete it, the absence of a map, the absence of anyone who knew where to look, or how to guide the body through what it had frozen in place of release. You have likely tried things: talking, journaling, yoga classes where you held your breath through hip openers and gripped the floor with your toes, breathing exercises that created temporary calm but left the underlying charge untouched. None of those failed because you failed. They failed because they were working at the surface of a structure that goes much deeper. The special guide, Healing in Motion 22, Somatic Cycles, Release Trauma, Restore Flow and Return to Creation, was built specifically for this depth. It is organized around 22 somatic cycles, each one designed to address a specific layer of held charge in the body, working from the sacrum upward through each of the 12 thresholds this video maps. The approach is precise, unhurried, and grounded in the same research tradition this entire video is rooted in. The people who have moved through it have described things that cannot be explained by information alone. A loosening behind the sternum that had been there for years, a softening in the jaw that arrived without effort, a sense of coming home to a body that had felt hostile for a very long time. Those real experiences shared in their own words are waiting for you in the first pinned comment below, alongside the link to access the guide. That link is available for a limited time only. This is the map. The door is real, and it opens from the inside. The science did not arrive to explain the mystery, it arrived to confirm what the body already knew. Stephen Porges spent decades mapping the nervous system's response to safety and threat, and what he uncovered, published as the polyvagal theory in 1994 and expanded across subsequent decades of research, rearranged the entire architecture of how we understand human suffering. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body, branching downward from the brainstem through the throat, the heart, the lungs, the gut, is not simply a conduit for signals. It is the body's primary organ of social engagement, of rest, of the most ancient biological determination between connection and collapse. Porges identified 3 distinct states of nervous system activation, each one mapping with startling precision onto the 12 thresholds we are about to walk. The ventral vagal state, the state of genuine safety and social connection, is the baseline that trauma steals. The sympathetic state, mobilized for fight or flight, is the charge that gets locked into the psoas, the diaphragm, the throat, and the dorsal vagal state, the most ancient evolutionary response, the one the nervous system reaches for when there is no escape and no hope, is the freeze, the collapse, the shutdown that lives deepest in the tissue, heaviest in the sacrum, most silent in the jaw. What Porges gave the world was not only a map of dysfunction, it was a map of return. Because the ventral vagal state is not destroyed by trauma, it is buried beneath it, and it can be reached, not through willpower, not through narrative, but through precisely the kind of slow, attentive, body-centered engagement that every ancient tradition prescribed. Bessel van der Kolk's clinical research, consolidated in what became one of the most transformative books in modern psychiatric literature, demonstrated through brain imaging studies that traumatic memory does not process through the prefrontal cortex the way ordinary memory does. Instead, it activates the amygdala, suppresses Broca's area, the brain's speech center, and floods the body with sensation. The traumatized person is not telling a story, they are reliving a physical event. And this is why talking, in isolation, cannot reach it. The limbic system, the emotional and survival brain, does not speak in sentences. It speaks in sensation, posture, breath, and movement. The neuroplasticity research pioneered by Michael Merzenich and extended into trauma treatment by practitioners working in somatic traditions confirms that the nervous system's holding patterns are not permanent. They are learned, and what is learned can be unlearned, not by force but by the precise application of new experience to the living tissue of an intelligent body. The fascia research of Robert Schleip, which demonstrated that connective tissue contains its own nerve supply and its own contractile capacity, adds a layer that is both humbling and hopeful. The body is not simply responding to the brain. It is in active, bi-directional conversation with it. Change the tissue and you change the signal. Change the signal and you change the state. This is not spirituality replacing science. This is science arriving, slightly breathless, at the door the mystics left open. The protocol is simple, specific, and asks nothing of you except your willingness to be present with your own body for a short, sustained period of time. Begin lying on your back, on a firm surface, with your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor, hip-width apart. This is the position of least compression in the spine, the position in which the sacrum can release its grip on the pelvic floor and the psoas can begin to lengthen without effort. Place your hands on your lower abdomen, just below the navel. Do not breathe into the chest. Instead, allow the breath to drop, to fall downward into the pelvis, expanding your hands with each inhale, releasing them on each exhale. Do this for 3 complete breath cycles, and simply notice. You are not trying to relax. You are trying to sense. There is a difference. Relaxation is a goal the nervous system can resist. Sensation is a doorway it cannot close. After 3 cycles of breath, allow the feet to slowly slide along the floor until the legs are almost straight, then slowly draw them back to the bent position. Do this at the pace of a breath. Slide out on the exhale, draw in on the inhale. This is a form of pendulation, a term Peter Levine used to describe the careful rhythmic movement between activation and settling, between expansion and return. You are not forcing the psoas to release. You are inviting it to remember the difference between extending and contracting, which is something it has been unable to feel when locked in a single state for years. After 8 to 10 of these gentle cycles, let the legs come to rest bent again and turn your attention to the weight of your sacrum against the floor. You may notice nothing. You may notice a subtle pulse, a warmth, a slight trembling. Whatever is present, stay with it. Do not narrate it. Do not interpret it. Simply witness it with the same quality of attention you might give a sleeping child. If trembling begins, do not stop it. Trembling is completion. It is the discharge Levine watched the gazelle perform. It is the nervous system untying itself, one thread at a time. After 5 minutes, very slowly, bring your awareness upward from the sacrum, through the lumbar, into the thoracic spine, up to the base of the throat. On your next exhale, open your mouth slightly and allow whatever sound is present to leave without shaping it. Not a word, not a note, a vibration. The vagus nerve runs through the throat. Sound is direct medication for the ventral vagal state. You may feel foolish. Do it anyway. Then rest in silence for 2 minutes, still, attentive, present. This is one complete, somatic cycle. You have done something real. There was a woman who came to a somatic therapist in her mid-40s, having spent 3 decades managing what she called her anxiety, which was the word her first therapist had given her when she was 14, and which she had carried like a diagnosis carved in stone. She had tried medication, talk therapy, 2 different meditation traditions, and a year of rigorous yoga practice, all of which had given her tools, vocabularies, and occasional windows of peace, none of which had reached what she privately called the thing behind the thing. She was not dramatic about it. She was simply honest. Something remained. A tightening in the low belly when she heard raised voices, a clenching in the jaw that returned every night regardless of how peaceful the day had been, a sense that her body was always slightly ahead of her, bracing for something she could not name, because she had not yet learned that naming was not the point. The first time, she lay on the floor and felt her sacrum against the ground and placed her hands on her belly and simply breathed downward without trying to fix anything. She said afterward that she had cried, not from sadness. She could not explain it. She said it was like being recognized by someone she had not seen in a very long time. The body recognizing itself. The sacrum, under the gentle weight of attention, releasing something so slowly she almost missed it. A millimeter of softness. A single thread of the knot beginning to loosen. She did not complete the healing that day. Healing of this kind does not happen in a single session, but something oriented. Something that had been turned away from itself turned back. She describes the weeks that followed as a conversation she was finally allowed to have, not in words, but in sensation, in small releases, in the gradual and unmistakable sense that the body she lived in was, for the first time in memory, slightly more like home. That is not a miracle. That is biology. That is a nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do when given the right conditions. That is the map being walked. The first and most honest obstacle is not disbelief. Most people watching this feel something shift simply from hearing the framework named with precision. The first obstacle is the culture you were shaped by, a culture that equates stillness with laziness, that mistakes trembling for weakness, that treats the body's signals as inconveniences to be overridden rather than instructions to be read. You were trained, likely before you had language, to perform competence regardless of your internal state, to be productive, to be composed, to convert your sensation into story, and your story into action, and to keep the cycle running without pause. Lying on the floor for 15 minutes doing what might look from the outside like nothing is a genuinely radical act within that context. And the nervous system, which learned its holding patterns within exactly that cultural pressure, will sometimes resist. It will offer restlessness. It will manufacture urgency. It will suggest that you return to this later, when things are calmer, when you have more time, when the moment is right. The moment will not arrive on its own. It must be chosen, and it must be chosen small enough to be survivable for a nervous system that has been vigilant for years. Start with 5 minutes, not 15. Start with the breath alone. Start with one hand on the lower belly, and the single instruction to feel the floor beneath you. Nothing more. The principle here is what somatic practitioners call titration, borrowing from chemistry the idea of introducing a small amount of one substance into another, carefully, to observe the reaction, rather than overwhelming the system with too much change too quickly. You are not trying to flood the valve open. You are trying to teach the body that opening is safe. That takes repetition. It takes patience. It takes a quality of self-compassion that many people find more difficult than the practice itself, because the culture that taught you to override your body also taught you that needing to heal it was a sign of failure. It was not. It was a sign that you survived something, and that survival had a cost, and that the cost can now, in small and steadfast increments, be repaid. The deeper truth this entire map reveals is not about trauma. It is about belonging, not belonging to a group or an identity, but the most primary belonging, the one that precedes all others, the belonging of a consciousness to its own body, the reunion of the self with its first and most faithful home. Wilhelm Reich, the Austrian psychoanalyst who first described what he called character armor, the chronic muscular rigidity that forms around unresolved emotional experience, understood that releasing these physical holdings was not simply therapeutic. It was a restoration of vitality itself, of what he named orgone energy, the undifferentiated life force that flows freely through an unarmored body and contracts into rigid, defended structure when the organism is threatened beyond its capacity to complete the response. Reich's work was too radical for the medicine of his time. The subsequent decades of somatic research have confirmed piece by piece what his observations first outlined. The poet, Rainer Maria Rilke, who understood the body's inner life with the precision of a scientist and the permission of an artist, wrote in Letters to a Young Poet that we must trust in the difficult, we must hold on to what is hard, for everything in nature grows and defends itself in its own way, and is characteristically and spontaneously itself, seeks at all costs to be so, and against all opposition. This is not a poetic consolation, it is a somatic instruction. The body, in its deepest intelligence, is always seeking to return to its own coherent, spontaneous, fully inhabited self. Every knot it formed was the best solution it had in an impossible moment. Every one of those knots can now be met, not with judgment, not with force, but with the intelligent, patient attention of someone who finally understands what they are looking at. This is not healing as repair. This is healing as restoration, a return to the original frequency, the original flow, the original wholeness that was never destroyed, only waiting, in the tissue, for the map to be placed in your hands. If something in this video reached you in a way that went below the level of information, if you felt it somewhere in the body rather than simply understood it in the mind, then you already know what this work is for. Like this video so that more people who are silently carrying this map can find it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because this work continues. Each video a deeper layer of the same essential truth, a community gathering around the knowledge that the body is not the problem, it is the way through. Share this with someone who has been looking in the wrong direction for too long. Type these words in the comments right now. My body is not broken. It is waiting to be heard, because saying that, even typed, even quietly, is a signal the nervous system receives. And click the video on your screen now to continue the journey, because the next layer of the map is already laid out and ready for you. This channel exists for one reason only: to return you to yourself, one threshold at a time, with precision, with care, and with the absolute conviction that what has been frozen can be freed.